Hey, LinkedIn, and welcome to Business Unusual. This is a live show where we talk about the changing nature of work. I am Susie Jackson. I'm an editor on the LinkedIn news team coming to you today live to talk about K-12 education and getting back to school safely. We're going to be talking later in the show with a panel of K-12 educators from across the US about how to have a safe and successful academic year. It is kicking off a week of shows dedicated to education here on Business Unusual. I hope you tune in throughout the week to have this conversation with us, to also to look at what students are doing going back to college, how universities are trying to prep as well. Before we get to that main story today, I want to look at one of the big stories that members are talking about on LinkedIn today, August 17th. Working parents are at a breaking point. It's the 6-month mark of juggling work, kids, and household duties with schools about to reopen in the fall. Some places have already reopened. Many parents are struggling to find adequate childcare. The Wall Street Journal reporting that rising childcare costs could also hamper an economic rebound, with parents allocating more money for care than for savings or investment. LinkedIn member Nishama Katan has come to the platform to talk about her experiences as a single mom who also works. She says part of the problem is that we know things will keep changing, and in her opinion, she says probably not for the better. She wants to know how much longer everyone can decide to ignore the huge cost of schools being mostly closed, the cost that it's taking on working parents. For more stories like these, check out the LinkedIn News module. If you're on your desktop, it's to the right of your newsfeed. If you're on your mobile app, you click into the search box, you'll see that story and more from the LinkedIn editors. I want to bring our main story up that relates to this working parent situation. Our main story today is talking about back to school. It's returning time to the classroom. How do we do that safely? It's been a lightning rod issue all summer as coronavirus continues to sow uncertainty. Parents and educators have been sparring about how and whether to open schools safely. New York Times reporting that some schools in Georgia, Tennessee, Mississippi, and Indiana have been back to school for 2 weeks already. The Cherokee County School District in suburban Atlanta ordered 1,200 students and staff into quarantine shortly after opening, when students quickly began testing positive. The LA Unified School District announcing tests starting today for hundreds of thousands of staff and students, even as that district plans to open on a full remote schedule. In a moment, we're going to speak with a panel of K-12 educators about what their experiences have been like with fall reopenings of school. But before we bring them out, I want to hear from you as well. We're here to talk about these issues as a community. I want to know, are you a teacher yourself, an administrator? Do you work in staff, in a staff support role in a school? How have reopening plans been going for you? Have they allowed you to plan for your own safe mental health well-being to get back to school in a productive way? Or maybe are you a working parent that we heard from the journal article might be at a breaking point right now, trying to figure out childcare and work from home when you're sharing the same space. And maybe you've gone through it in the spring already, had a break in the summer. What have we learned from that? I want to hear from you. Tell us in the comments what you're thinking, how you're working through these issues. Talk to me, talk to each other. We're going to get to as many of your comments, questions, and thoughts as we can on the show today. With that, I would like to bring out my panel of teachers. Joining us now from across the U.S., we have Danielle Shelton. She is an English and literature teacher at the high school level in South Florida. Ashley McCall is an elementary school teacher in the Chicago Public Schools. And Gina Amok is a science teacher at the high school level in Los Angeles. Welcome to the show, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
It's great to hear from you all. I myself am the parent of a soon-to-be school-age child. I have a lot of questions, too. I'm really hoping to learn from what you all are experiencing in your districts, and I think everyone else in the stream would agree with me. I want to start with just a quick lightning round, though. I want to know, are you going back in person in the fall or not? And give me just a quick snapshot of what that looks like. We're going to drill into some of the details, but let's just start by seeing where we're all at. So, Danielle, are you going back to school in the fall in person?
No, currently we are on Canvas, which is our online platform. So Broward County Public Schools will be starting school virtually.
Okay, so virtually for you. Ashley, what about you?
We will also be starting remotely in Chicago Public Schools. There was initially a pitch for a hybrid plan a couple of weeks ago, but after a number of community forums in which families around the city gave feedback around the plan, Chicago Public Schools made the second announcement to shift to remote learning.
Okay, so that's 2 for full remote. Gina, how about you?
Yeah, so Los Angeles County is on the state's watch list, and because of that, all schools, public and private, are starting 100% remote in the fall.
Okay, so that's 3 remote where I'm from, where my kids are going to go to school in New York. We will be going in person in some way, shape, or form. It's been really interesting to see how different schools are handling this throughout the country. I want to talk about the communication part for a moment. I think there's a lot that goes into all these decisions, and all that information is changing all of the time. I've heard it's been a challenge for other teachers and for parents and communities as they try to figure out how this is all going to work. Ashley, let me start with you. How has communication been in your system? And how has it affected your planning?
Well, the comment that you brought up actually from, I believe, a parent said it best. Things are constantly changing. I think to the best of their ability, CPS has, sent out emails and, like I said, invited families and community members to be a part of community forums. But as far as planning goes, a lot of what I would normally be doing has really been put on pause because I anticipated the changes. Even since March, the last minute decision to close schools, the belabored decisions to continue closing has really meant that there's only so much that I can plan right now without having a really clear sense of what remote learning or going back to school is going to look like. Now that the full remote start has been announced, it's a lot easier for me to get a sense of how many weeks I'm going to be remote, what platforms I'm going to be using. But the reality is it's mid-August, and starting this planning now versus starting even a month ago makes a huge difference.
So you've lost weeks of planning time that normally would be going into thoughtfully figuring out curriculum, making plans for the kind of student population you were going to have. Gina, I'm interested. I know that you still had summer school virtually over the season here. And did that help you prepare for this upcoming school year? And I'm wondering if there's any tips you can share with other teachers who might be joining the stream about what worked, given what we just heard from Ashley, is that you're all figuring this out as you go, and it's changing all the time. So you were virtual over the summer. What have you learned?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that the benefit of teaching over the summer was learning how to start remotely with a fresh group of students. So when we went remote in the spring, it's a group of students that I had a year of fostering relationships with. We already had kind of the dynamics of the class set up. So it was figuring out how do we make this work via Zoom. And in the summer, what I quickly learned is how challenging it is to foster new relationships remotely, and also how kind of prolonged isolation is for students and for teachers. And so it gave me a chance to kind of work out and tinker with some ideas of kind of synchronous versus asynchronous learning. How am I going to use my class time? What effectively works for students? So it was helpful, if not a bit sad. It's, I believe that all teachers go into teaching because they love interacting with students. And, remote is not the same. So it's a little bit sad, but very helpful in terms of thinking about how to structure classes every day to meet my students where they are.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. Remote's not the same. I think you all are making heroic efforts to make this work and to make it as engaging for students as possible. Gina, you brought up the good point about fostering relationships with new students now over the summer. Maybe you had pre-existing relationships in the spring, and maybe it's a smoother transition. Danielle, I'm interested in hearing from you. With that in mind, what do you feel like is especially challenging about the online experience?
One of the things, well, there are several things that are going to be challenging. But one of the things that are going to be challenging is connecting with students and connecting with parents and getting them to learn how to log in and because right now they're saying all students need to log in and they need to check in for attendance. So getting students back in the mindset of, even though you're in front of your computer, you still need to log in. I still need to count you for attendance. And we have been told that we still will need to be fully engaged in online for our full block. We're on block schedule here, and it's a 90-minute block. So one of the challenges is certainly going to be how to keep them engaged in front of a computer screen for a 90-minute block, and then knowing that when they leave us, they're going to another 90-minute block from another teacher. So how to just keep them from burning out is going to be another challenge all by itself.
Yeah, I think a lot of us feel that Zoom fatigue just in our working lives. And now add to that you're a kid. And that's not been your experience with going to work or going to school every day. We are on computers a little bit more, but being a kid now having to sit in front of the screen for class and pay attention for long stretches of time, I think that's interesting to point out. Danielle, thank you. I want to welcome some other teachers from the stream who are joining us today. We have Tracy from Virginia. Welcome to the show. Antonio is a fourth grade teacher in Atlanta. This is his second week of teaching virtually. Muish is a middle school math teacher from New Jersey. Thanks for joining us. And Steven says, I'm a teacher also. I will miss some in-person teaching. It's going to be a challenging year. I think it is going to be a challenging year. If you're just joining us now, we're talking to 3 teachers in the US here who are working through some of those challenges now. Ashley, you teach reading. What are the challenges of bringing that online? There's some physicality to teaching reading. Talk to us through those challenges.
Yeah, there is. So, I mean, the biggest loss is students won't have regular access to our classroom library, right? So students spend in our reading block the majority of their time, if not in the library, near the library, with a book in hand, in book clubs. And I am working to recreate as many of those experiences as possible. But a lot of that will be, fundraising to get books into the hands of all 75 of my students. The reality of not getting everyone the same books, but still doing what teachers do, which is differentiating to meet the needs of those individual students. Figuring out how to acclimate students to e-readers when it's appropriate. And like Gina said, find the balance between synchronous and asynchronous work for students, because, I can't keep them in front of the screen doing direct literacy instruction for hours and hours on end. So really just rethinking what reading looks like in this context.
Yeah, and speaking of rethinking, we're talking about the kids having to rethink the way they're going to learn, and you rethinking the way you're going to hold their attention. Gina, why don't you take this one? How has this changed the way you think about yourself as a teacher, if it has, about your strengths and the skills that you bring to effectively reach these students?
I think, I'm a science teacher, so most of what I do is kind of hands-on, and that is kind of completely lost in a remote environment. And so, I think I've had to rethink, how I get content across to students. So I plan in the fall to use a lot more time in class, kind of asynchronously, rather than lecturing or, time that I would use for a lab, maybe having them watch a lab video and then spending time in breakout groups with them, problem solving together, rather than using class in this kind of lecture or lab based situation. But it's, I think teachers are innately flexible, and this is our flexibility being challenged to kind of the nth degree.
Thank you for that answer. It actually answers a question that Clara in the stream had about the transition from doing labs in person to remotely. So thank you for giving those tips. I want to move into some questions we're getting in the stream about access. So we have this merging of the classroom and the home. We have Sonia who wants to know, if you're remote, what are you doing to make sure all students have tech and internet resources? And similarly, Yvette asks, what about students who don't have internet? Does anyone want to take that? Danielle, please.
Yes. What Broward County did as a district, they actually sent out an email, and they actually said, and they made phone calls, the robocalls that everybody kind of hangs up on, but they called around and they reached out, they sent people to houses, and they said, do you have a computer? Do you have internet access? And they provided students that did not have computers with computers. They set up times for them to come pick them up or for them to drop them off. And on top of the computers, then there was a phone company, I'm not sure which one, I don't remember, but they were offering free internet for students who may not have internet access within the home. So I know for us here in South Florida, they definitely did provide computers, and then the phone companies did provide free internet service for the children to be able to log on, as well as there were some places where if you knew, this is just what I've been told from students, some of them actually drove close to the campus and kind of sat in the car to pick up the Wi-Fi from the school. outside in the parking lot. And even though they weren't there long, they were there long enough to be able to upload assignments or download assignments or be able to kind of get what they needed, take notes, and then kind of travel off. But I think Broward really did a good job in terms of trying to reach every student in the county to see, did you have a laptop and did you have internet?
That's amazing dedication on the part of the students and by your county to try and close those gaps. Does anyone else have experience with that? I think it's a really important thing to address. Ashley, please share with us.
Yeah, so Chicago Public Schools did something similar in terms of communicating to the district, some availability of additional Chromebooks that would be distributed to students. But if you know anything about CPS, it is a huge urban district. And unfortunately, that only went so far. And so it was really up to individual schools to both distribute technology, to rely on donors and partners for access to devices. My collaborating teacher and I actually took funds that were initially for a project that we couldn't facilitate anymore and redirected that to get tablets for students. And so I so appreciate this question because it re-emphasizes the equity issue of remote learning and transitioning to expecting students and families to do this work at home without adequate preparation and materials. Because while we also had here in Chicago students, driving every which way to get access to internet, or my school on the southwest side of Chicago had a team of folks who were going out to homes, making sure families had internet, helping them partner with Xfinity, helping them get devices. We really have to ask ourselves what it is we are expecting of families and how we make that more equitable. It's really unacceptable that we're relying on, short-term partnerships with internet providers or donors for a problem that's not going away. And so what does it mean to prepare students and families for remote learning for at least the first, semester, first quarter of the year? And how do we make sure we're looking at long-term solutions, not just short-term fixes?
Yeah, thank you for that. And speaking of the short-term, long-term look at things, Gina, I'm interested. We're hearing a lot about parents who have access to more resources, setting up learning pods or having money for private tutors. What do you think that does for you as a teacher, and then for the long and short-term implications of these students and their trajectories?
So I'm a teacher, and I'm also a parent of a kindergartner and a second grader. And I've seen conversations both in the school that I teach and also the school that my children go to about setting up these learning pods. I think social pods are kind of necessary. I think kids getting out and being socially distant but connected with their peers is incredibly important. This is going to sound insane coming from an educator, but I think this idea that we need to race to get our kids to be ahead or to give them some edge is not what we should be doing at this time. I think kids are under an enormous amount of stress already. They're isolated, they're having to transition to learning in a way that they've never had to. Some kids don't even have access to the learning that schools are providing. And I think by layering on the anxiety of some of my peers or groups are establishing pods to learn is really counterproductive. I think we have to trust that teachers and schools are going, to kind of put their best foot forward, and that children will be fine as long as we kind of hold that space for them. I have a real problem with education pods, a real problem.
Thank you for that statement, Gina. Thank you for feeling comfortable sharing that. That's a strong statement. I'm wondering, Ashley or Danielle, do you have any feelings about that? Same or different? Ashley, how about you?
Sure. Well, Susie, this really makes me think about part of your introduction, right? You said something about what does it mean to have a safe and successful year? And I think that in the same way that we've had to redefine a lot of our day-to-day lives, we really need to think about what we mean when we say safe and successful. So of course, we are concerned about the physical safety of children, of students, of families, and of everyone in our communities. But what does it mean if our students are physically safe, but like Gina said, they don't have that social connection? What does it mean if students are safe, but we're not shifting our expectations or shifting our supports for students so that they are prepared and have the supports to work through all of the trauma that they have been experiencing long before the pandemic and since this pandemic has begun? What does successful mean? Does success mean that, I've hit all of the standards that I normally would have hit in a third grade year? Does success mean that I'm still, achieving certain grades or receiving a certain report card? The reality is at the third grade level, no. We need to think about what it means to serve maybe our rising seniors or our eighth graders and what that looks like for our kindergartners and our first graders, because it is not the same. And that is okay. Once again, it comes back to equity. How do we make sure that we are not inundating students and families with the burden of fixing something that is not their fault, right? It's not anyone's fault, but it is all of our responsibility to make sure we're taking care of everyone and redefining what safe and successful school year really means.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to consider, that students need different things at different ages, at different stages of their academic career and their lives. Danielle, we talked a lot on this show about work-life balance in terms of the adult, of the parent, the caregiver, et cetera. But I want to know, what do you think about work-life balance in terms of your students?
Well, one of the things that I think people don't understand is most of us as teachers, we have families also. I have a little one that's going into first grade, so I'm going to have to find work-life balance. And then I teach high school seniors, and I also teach dual enrollment. So those students, some of them have jobs, and I really try to focus. And when I have them and I'm face to face, the first thing I have them do is make out a schedule and figure out, let's lay out your day and see what this is going to look like when I'm trying to prepare them to start the college essay. But this year it's so different. So this year I'm really going to have to take time, and I've decided that I'm going to have a mindfulness room in my Canvas classroom where they can actually go and actually tell me what's going on with them, and I can kind of navigate for them. Hey, this is what you need to do to make sure that not only are you completing your work or completing things at home, but you also are able to fit in your work schedule, because the work-life balance is a real thing. And I do think there are students who are absolutely going to fatigue, but I also think that we are strong enough and our kids are strong enough that they are able to push through that fatigue to get to the end result. So I think what it's going to boil down to is empathy on the part of the teachers, on the part of the district, and on the part of the parents, to really understand, these kids are going to be under a huge amount of stress. A lot of them have anxiety. A lot of them are dealing with trauma. So we're going to have to show them how to have the growth mindset. We're going to have to show them how not to sit in the problem and just complain about, I don't want it to be this way, but this is how it is right now. So let's figure out how to push through. And that's one of the things that I want to relay over to my students, especially my seniors who are leaving, is this is what you're going to have to do. Work-life balance. This is what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to be able to push through what's uncomfortable for you in order for you to get to this next phase. Because like Ashley said, we don't know when this is going to end, and we have no real gauge of the end of this pandemic. So we have to teach them, one, how to cope, and two, how to move forward so that they are still productive.
That's so important to talk about mindset and the importance of that going into all of this as a strong base. We have Sonia in the stream who says we need to focus on young people's mental health. So echoing those sentiments, look at their stress levels too during this time. For 5 months, they've been away from school and their educational institutions. We also have Mary, who's a teacher, joining us as well. Hello, Mary, saying that I see my middle school girls more emotional now and getting very depressed about where their schoolmates are and seeing their teachers in person. So we have mental health issues here on behalf of the students and thinking about their well-being. But I'm curious about your own mental health. This is your job. You're all being asked to teach virtually right now. So we're not talking about questions of coming into a physical space and safety in that sense. But Gina, there's so many questions about mental health and well-being. What about your own? How do you balance all of that coming into all this uncertainty?
I don't know. I think I think it's reminding myself that the grace that I want to extend to my students and their families is the same grace that I have to extend to myself. That, there are going to be some good days where things really work and my kids at home are handling their stuff and I have like great interactions with my students, and there are going to be days that are challenging. And I think knowing that, like, you kind of have to ride the ebb and flow, and then finding time to do things that, make you feel centered and make you feel like yourself. So I'm a runner. And so I've been getting up extra early so I can go out when nobody else is out and just, run 5 miles to have time by myself. But I think teachers are really, really good sacrificers. We're really good at serving others. And I think it's important to remember that you can only serve others as well as you serve yourself. So kind of the patience and the love that we extend to our students and our families, we need to kind of turn that inside and recognize that, we also need that a lot right now. And having, I also think having a group of teacher friends people that are experiencing the same thing that you are helps when you're trying to connect to students or struggling with establishing a class, and you have a platform or a group of people who are kind of riding that same wave.
Yeah.
So you don't feel so alone.
Maybe this can be one of your teacher support circles now. I think it's a really important question. I'm glad you're taking care of yourself, Gina. You get out for a run. Ashley, how are you taking care of yourself? What can other teachers learn from you?
Well, I would echo Gina, ebb and flow. I really struggled in March when we first closed to show myself that grace. I think that I worked really hard to be there 24/7 to respond to all of the needs of students and families. And then as a result, started to feel guilty when I couldn't do everything, and then had to step back and remember, of course, I can't do everything. That is not my job. So what is it that I have the capacity to do? How can I partner with other friends and colleagues to close those gaps? And also, how do I create a schedule? How do I make space for myself, which we can be really, really bad at. But it's so essential to take care of ourselves. I think that we're going to fail, and naming that up front so that we're okay with failure, and we make our students okay with failure. And when we learn from those failures, so when things don't work out in the classroom, when I do a really poor job of showing myself that grace, making the adjustment and bouncing right back. For me, I've also been getting up early to get moving, because working at home means I am not climbing 3 flights of stairs every day, which I really needed. And also, cooking and trying to find that little bit of joy each and every day. I wanted to comment on something Gina said that really stuck with me about teachers being servants. I think that's so true. And I think that we are our best selves, not just teachers, anyone. I think we are our best selves when we are serving others, and we are really considering how interconnected we all are. But I want to push and say that it is not our job. It is not the job of teachers to save the world right now. We can't. It is not possible. And so I am so grateful for every teacher, every school-based individual who is doing work, and a community member that's doing work. But this is something we have to figure out together. And I just want every teacher to remember that. I'm talking to myself too, guys. No one teacher can fix this.
Yeah, thank you. And Gara in the stream is agreeing, saying self-care is so important. Latrell is joining us to say that I believe we have to let go of the idea that we have to get this perfect. So echoing what you're saying, Ashley, we're not going to fix the world here. Says these times require us to remain adaptable and willing to be more on the bar, change the bar with success looks like. So let's all be a little easier on ourselves during this while we're all trying really hard. I want to do a quick lightning round here. We've got a lot of good advice about how you all are taking care of yourselves throughout this to bring your best self to the classroom on behalf of your students. What about some advice for nervous parents out there? Parents like myself who will be starting some homeschooling this fall, parents who are maybe deep in it all the way through the spring and even the summer. Gina, you've been teaching all summer long. Let's just do a quick few words of advice for parents. How should they be helping themselves and their students navigate this? Danielle, let's start with you.
My first piece of advice really is to be okay not getting it right the first time. Be okay not logging in and getting it perfect. Be okay with the fact that your student might miss an assignment and they didn't know where the calendar was, or they didn't know how to navigate the online classroom. Be okay reaching out to the teacher and saying, I am super confused. Can you help me through this? Because most of us are on Remind. Most of us, our parents will have our email addresses and our text addresses and our Microsoft Teams and our Zooms will be in reach. So one of my pieces of advice really is to just be okay with it not being perfect, and be okay with having a learning curve and with not getting it right the first time or the second time or the third time. Be okay with it.
Okay, great advice. Be okay if you're messing up the login or anything else the first few times. Just to give yourself some time to get used to it. Gina, what about you? Advice for parents?
I think communication, keeping communication lines open. If they see, if it, like Danielle said, like if something's not working, don't be afraid to reach out to a teacher. But if you see something going on with your child, or you feel like there's something that we need to know, like online learning is only going, or even hybrid or anything, learning is only as good as kind of the communication between students and the school and the teacher and the parents. So communicate early, communicate often. I think it will help your students feel like it's okay. And it will also help teachers know it's really difficult to navigate what's happening in a student's life remotely when you see them on a screen, or sometimes, you see their blacked out screen with their name on it. It's hard to know. And so making sure that you are actively communicating with your teachers, I think is really important. And remembering that we care, we are here because we want to help students succeed. And success is going to rely heavily on us knowing how that child is showing up at home.
Yeah, so communication, and I think I'm also hearing partnership too. Remember to partner with the teacher and to let them know the things that they can't see as easily because they're not in person anymore. Ashley, advice for parents.
Yeah, I would echo communication and partnership. I also taught over the summer, and that was key. Second, figure out what works for you. So what's challenging, especially if you have kids that are different ages, they probably have different schedules, and it can get really, really overwhelming. Once you get that information from your school districts, from your teachers, lay out a plan that works and be okay with adjusting that plan as you go. I would say the third thing is you are not behind and your kids are not behind. And I know that is so hard to believe, but all of us are living through a pandemic right now. All children have, been out of a physical school building for months. And so it's not a race. And I think the more we remember that we are working through this together, and that, again, that idea of grace, that we are showing each other grace through this moment that will get us to the next moment, the more we can move away from this idea of competition. And we will be so much more productive and so much more healthier, so much more healthy, excuse me. And I think that's what's going to help us have that safe and successful year.
Great reminders for all of us. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us on Business Unusual today. It's been really helpful to hear how you're navigating this return back to school.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
That was Danielle Shelton, an English and literature teacher from South Florida at the high school level, Ashley McCall, elementary school for Chicago Public Schools, and Gina Almach, who teaches science at the high school level in Los Angeles. Thank you, too, for joining us today. We've loved seeing your questions and comments in the stream from parents and teachers alike. I hope this was useful to you. This is the first show in our week of shows about education. Tomorrow, my colleague Caroline Fairchild will be hosting a panel with the presidents of 3 major universities about the future of higher ed. She'll be chatting with the president of Florida A&M, Howard University, and University of Texas Rio Grande Valley. Please join her tomorrow at noon Eastern. And I am Susie Jackson. Thank you so much for joining us today.